Hello everybody and welcome to this episode. Actually kind of the last in the series of this gearbox knock-in noise that wasn't the gearbox but was the gearbox mount episode series thing. So this is the last one basically. In this episode I reinstalled the gearbox, put the brakes back on, all of that kind of thing, and then lastly put the engine back in and finally get to test drive it and see if the problem has been solved. I'm here with little Dusty boy. Say hi. So I'm going to spend the weekend with him. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode, and as before I hope you get some information from it and learn something as I did. Okay, enjoy it. Thanks. No problem, huh? Right, let's line it up. Like that. And I'll start lowering the car down a little bit. See if we can line it up. So I'm all prepared. I have the sockets and the spanners I need, 27 for these big ones. I blasted the earth-in strap so it has a nice good contact. I got the nuts and the washers, spring washers ready for where the gearbox mount goes up in there. So now all I need to do is lower it down kind of somewhere in place and bolt it up. One thing I've forgotten, there should be a rubber bellow thing on here, so I'll go and get that. Okay, so I just cleaned off some of the mud that was under here, and I noticed, so this is where the nose of the gearbox goes through to the linkage, and you can see that it's not quite round. So I'm wondering if that is where that's where our knock-in noise has been coming from. So the gearbox has actually been moving so much that it's been touching the body there. So we're pretty much in position. You can see the frame is actually laying on top of the table. We're lined up straight, so I should be able to just slide that in and start bolting it up. Right, it wasn't too bad. I had to do a little bit of wiggling. I backed off those two nuts so you can have some movement on the mount to fit it on to the body or the chassis. So now they're located, so I'll just get a couple of nuts on there to hold it in place, and then hopefully I'll be able to just get these in, get them started, and then I can get the table out. Oh yeah, look at that, just straight in there. So then I can get this table out of the way, and then we can see what we're doing. Right, everything's tightened up, big ones. At the back there, all of this, the earth strap is in. I just had to do a little bit of realignment with these because when I put these into position, it twisted them slightly. So I just removed the bottom cable tie, lined it up and then replaced it. So all now is I need to put the gearbox cable, clutch cable back in, fill up with some gearbox oil, reconnect, put the bearings in, put the brakes back on, bolt these up, shocks on. Pretty simple stuff really. Just putting it all back together again. Start a motor. Right, let's go. So when putting these bolts back in, this spring plate is actually quite twisted, so you can't get the bolt isn't long enough basically to get it started. So I always get a pair of mole grips, take up some of the twist, and then just get the nut on the end, don't tighten it up. Then don't forget to slide your bump stop over, and then you can put the last bolt in and then tighten them all up. On some of these I actually have a notch on here that, yeah, then there's a mark there. So I normally line those up as well. Also, one thing to bear in mind is the bolt that goes through where the bump stop is slightly longer than these other two. I've made that mistake many times where I bolted them up and then the last one isn't long enough. Right, we've now got these all buttoned up, bump stops in place, the shocks in place. Now we turn our attention to putting the bearing back in. So, first goes on is this spacer, and it has a chamfered side and a flat side. So you can see the end of this shaft has a nice curve on it. So we put the chamfer side on first. That fits on there. Snug against there. And then the bearing goes on. Right, the next thing, this is something I always advise that you shouldn't do, but I've done. I actually bought the cheaper seal kit, and there's a reason for that. When I put this together last, I used the proper good seal kit, and I only need out of this really, I'm going to reuse the old seals that are on here, these ones, and the metal washers that I'll show you in a minute. So I only really needed the paper gaskets. So I just bought the cheap set just to use the gaskets, everything else I won't use. Hey, so let's take a look what you get in your B grade seal kit. I mean, check that out. I don't know if you can pick that up on camera. I mean, that is just absolute dog shit. I mean, imagine you spend your weekend repairing your car with stuff like this, and then the problem doesn't get solved. So then you end up ordering A quality stuff, waiting for it to deliver, and then you have to do it all over again. I mean, even this, like the edges on these are so sharp. But luckily I have some spare O-rings, because I'm not going to use those, and this is kind of what I needed because I couldn't be bothered to make them. Okay, so after you have put the bearing in, you put this washer on, that goes on there, and then you get your O-ring, a little bit of, I just put a bit of engine oil on there, or gearbox oil, and then we slip that on next. After the O-ring, you have this spacer, and one side has like this chamfer on, and that actually is what houses the O-ring. So that bit goes on first, and then you slide that all the way up to the O-ring. Next up, you can put the brake housing on. Make sure that this surface is clean, and same on the other side. And these are actually sided, so one for left and one for right. So you can see this is the right one because this is where the handbrake cable comes through, and that's your lever for your handbrake. So next, after that, your paper gasket. So you can see it has a hole at the bottom that lines up with that, and that's basically a drain hole for the gearbox oil if there's too much pressure in the gearbox. Instead of it leaking onto your brakes, it goes out the back through this little hole. So the gasket's on next. After the gaskets, you have this big O-ring. So again, a little bit of lube on there, and then you slide it over the bearing and it holds the paper gaskets in place. And then next up, you have this cap. So again, you see that there's the hole for the oil, so that goes at the bottom. I'm going to reuse the seal that was in there because it was brand new when I put this together not that long ago. So rather than use that B quality, I'm going to use this. So then that goes on. There is a slight problem though. There should be a big metal washer between you can see there's a gap there between the seal and the face of this end cap. There should be a metal washer in there. Today is Monday, so I didn't have the right size outer washers for these caps. So all I did, took the seal out and made a new washer the right size. So I've actually fitted this one, so you can see now that if the seal leaks, this is like a splash guard, and then the oil won't come into this area where the brake shoes are. It will go out the back of that little hole that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, just quickly show you on this side. So this is the new washer that I made. So it fits in there first, you see, nice and snug, and then your seal goes in. So always a little bit of oil on here, and then I use the old seal like that, and then I'll hammer on top of this to push this seal all the way in. And then next up, we thread the handbrake cable through the back here, like so, and then that needs to hook on there, and there's the little end cap that needs to be put on to hold this in place so it doesn't slide backwards and forwards. With the drum slid back on, I've just put this nut back on. It's not super tight, but I just tightened it up. Next thing is to adjust the brake shoes, because when we removed these we had to loosen them right off. So what you do is you line up the hole with the adjuster. So there's two adjusters, and then with the screwdriver you move the adjuster until the shoe touches the side of the drum. So you'll know when it's touching because you won't be able to spin it like this. So you do both adjusters, and then you back them off a little bit, so there's a slight little bit of drag, not much, just a little bit of contact, and then your brakes are set. So I've just set this one by moving it until this is solid, you see. I can't move it, and then I will back it off just a little bit. Starting to move. So there. So the next thing to put back in is these little brake lines that we took off. So I'll just put those back in, then I can release this clamp, and then we'll do a little bit of brake bleeding. Okay, so next up we can start filling the gearbox with gearbox oil. So we have this filling hole here. So we basically put that in. We have a drip tray underneath, and we'll fill it until it starts dripping outside of the filling hole. So then we know that it's at the right level. There we go. Let it settle. Add a little bit more. So there. Now we're there. Just wipe the excess off there. And then I have some of this pipe thread sealer on there. And then we just put that in, tighten it up, and don't go too crazy tightening it up because the case is soft aluminium and this plug is made of steel, so be careful when you tighten it up. There, done. So I need to change this bush, this one in here, but it's quite simple. I just need to take I've got a socket here, 11mm socket, so I just put that in there, tap it with a hammer and it should push it through, and then you just push the new one in until it's flush with the back there. I don't actually know if you can pick this up on the camera, but this is the old one and this is the new one, and the old one is slightly not quite round, so I guess when the starter motor's been spinning, it's like where the most strain is, it's worn a little bit of the bush out. So it's a good job that I am changing it now while the engine and everything is out. Always obviously double check it's the right size, because the 12-volt one is slightly different size, and that it fits on the end of the starter motor there. So let's just tap this back in. So now I think we're ready to reinstall the engine. I can't remember if I said about reattaching the clutch cable. It just goes through that support there, and then the cable goes through the lever, and I've just put the wing nut on there. It's not obviously set because I don't have the clutch back in the car, but you know, just double checking everything is tight and ready to go. I bled the rear brakes, really simple, because there was hardly any bleeding to do because I clamped the hoses. I just loosened the bleed nipple and pumped the brake a couple of times, and that was fine. So done that on both sides. Actually, the last thing I need to do is put the starter motor in, which is pretty simple because it's just that one bolt or one nut here. So I'll just put that back in. So with all that done, it's ready to put the engine in. So I've just wheeled the engine around, kind of got it in roughly the right position. It's a little bit too far forward there. I'll bring it back and then I'll start lifting the table. Bit of a juggle really, a bit of a lift of the table, lowering with the lift, and we'll get it in. So there we have it. As if by magic, look, the gearbox shaft has gone into the clutch and it's engaged, so that's great. I just had to pull the table back a little bit to lift the back end of the engine up, so now it's kind of aligned. So I just got to get these nuts on and then I can take the table away. My little tip for when you're tightening the top two bolts that bolt the gearbox to the engine is I put these mole grips on one end, so when I'm tightening the nut up, which is quite hard to get to behind the fan shroud and the firewall, it stops it from spinning. Like I said, there's a special tool you can get that has a magnet and like two arms on it that stops it. It sticks to the end of the bolt and stops it spinning, but this works really well for me, so that's a good tip. And then if you look down the back there, you can see the end of the bolt. It's quite hard to get to, but it's doable. I also have these extra long spanners that makes this job so much easier because that gap is so tight. As you see here, I use a similar trick with the mole grips when I'm threading through the accelerator cable. So I put the tube in like that. I add the mole grips just lightly on there, don't crush it, and it just adds a bit of weight and it stops against that fuel hose or whatever. So when you're trying to wiggle it through, it doesn't push the tube back out. Right, so we're actually nearly there. We've got to hook up the wiring. I'm going to put the new fuel filter in. We need to put some oil in the engine and put the filter back in. But we're almost ready to go. So now we have the engine in place. I need to put the oil strainer back in and the oil plug with the gaskets. In one of my previous videos, which was on the Karma Gear engine build, I said that there's no need to use any gasket sealer on the gaskets for the oil strainer. But Yanni actually mentioned that he always uses it on there, it doesn't do any harm, so I'm going to follow his advice because I don't want it to leak. So I'm just going to use a little bit of this aviation gasket cement like I did in the engine series on the two gaskets for putting the oil drainer back in. It's actually a really good idea to use it on this one. Look, I don't know if you can see, but this is really dented up. It's like somebody's hit it with a ball peen hammer. So using the aviation gasket sealer I think is probably a good idea. Next we can put some oil in the engine. So a standard 1200 engine should take about 2.5 litres of oil. When you're filling the engine with oil, you should always let it settle for a little bit. Let it all drain down to the bottom of the engine before you check the oil level. So while that's settling down, I think the next thing I need to do is put the new fuel filter in its new place. And the other thing I need to do is the throttle linkage. It has a spring on it, like a return spring. After that, I can put the wheels back on, tighten the nuts on the end of the shafts, and I think we're ready to start it. So, fuel filter relocated under here. I put a little clip there to hold it up away because you have here the exhaust pipe, so you want it as far away, obviously, from that. We are nearly there, ladies and gentlemen. I have put the spring, return spring for the accelerator back on. It's now topped up with oil. rear wheels are on. Then we're going to lower it down, and then we're going to tighten up these big nuts. The car's back on the ground. Man, we're getting so close now. Last thing to do is tighten these big nuts up. So handbrake's on, car's on the floor. I might put a chock underneath the wheel to stop it moving, but normally there's a tool you can buy that makes this really easy, because I can't remember exactly how tight this nut needs to be. It's something like 220 foot-pounds, I think. Is that right? But it's tight anyway. But I don't have that tool with me, so you need to line up the hole with the castle nut so you can put a pin through. I have the pin here. So because I don't have the tool, I'm just going to do it kin tight, okay? So 36mm socket, a big breaker bar, and okay, I need a piece of wood. Check where the hole is. Okay, so we go a little bit more. There it is. That's where it's going to be. I mean, I don't think that you're ever going to be able to tighten it round to the next slot. So I think that that's probably where it should be. There's different ways how to use these split pins, and probably none of them are wrong. Like, you can either twist it the other way and then bend both legs around, but I like to put the pin so it locates in there, and then I pull the longer one of the two round like that, so then it goes up inside the slot, and just bend it back, and then the other leg I just cut off. God, these are big ones. Oh, there we go, job done. Right, are you ready? This is the moment I've been waiting for. Should we do a wiggle test? So, last time when I gave these a wiggle, they moved a lot, but I didn't hear anything knocking on anything, but they moved a lot just from me wiggling from here. So let's see. Man, that's like solid compared to what it was. Oh, I do hope this is the solution, but yeah, hey, it's all back together, but it's 8:30, so I need to eat. So tomorrow after work, I'll double check everything, and then we'll go for a test drive. Right, so today is Wednesday after work. I did actually shoot some video yesterday, but my GoPro went into time-lapse mode, so none of the video was any good. But the one thing that I hadn't added to the video is the clutch cable tension. So I'll just show you quickly. So your clutch pedal should have a bit of play on it, like this. I think in the manual it says like 1 inch or 25mm. So that's about right, I think. So it's pretty simple. You just adjust that wing nut on the end of the cable on the gearbox end. You adjust it until you get the play like that. So simple as that. So the moment you've all been waiting for. Has the problem been solved? Has the knocking noise disappeared? Let's find out. It's absolutely perfect. Knocking noise is completely gone. Everything feels so much tighter, because imagine that gearbox was, and the engine was moving like this constantly every time you accelerated or decelerated or changed gear. So now that new mount is in place, everything feels so much smoother. Absolutely love this car. It's brilliant. It's so much fun and it's so relaxing at the same time. I just don't know if I can sell it, to be honest. But I mean, it was a lot of work to fix this knocking problem, and it was a long way round to solve the problem. But you know, sometimes with this hobby, that's the way things go. You have to try and eliminate the problems. And like I said before, if you like these videos, please click the like button, please click the subscribe button, please leave a comment. If you feel I've missed something out, or if there's something that wasn't quite clear, then please leave a comment. So again, thanks for watching, people, and until the next video, cheers.